time. Something has got to happen because we can no longer go down the path that we're going down. This country won't last another 6 months. This country won't last another 12 months if something doesn't happen. So it's time to flip the switch. It's time to get involved. It's time to move the line forward. And if you're not part of the solution, then you're part of the problem. So I don't care what flip the switch is. I don't care if that means that all of this nonsense is nonsense, or if some of it's true. All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Warriors, World Patriots, my fellow Americans. My name is Mike. I'm the host of the Liberty Warrior. Give me liberty or give me death. When tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes duty. I am on the road tonight. Man, I broadcasted here once before. I'm kind of in a little pavilion here right next to the Snake River. Lots of people here in this little park enjoying the warm weather. Family picnics, people swimming, people fishing. I think it's a little too early to water ski, catch hypothermia. It's not quite warm enough yet, but we're here. I got some special guests with us tonight. I'm still waiting for one more to show up, but I do have one in the waiting room. So, folks, listen, buckle up, enjoy the ride, because we're going to talk about a lot of great things tonight. We put out a warning last night. I think these two gentlemen we'll also, I guess, concur a little bit on what's happening here in America and around the world. And I know both of them are very informed on what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in the first guest. We're still waiting for the second one to show up, but we might as well go ahead and start the show. And of course, I'm on the road, so I'm pushing my bandwidth to its limits. I hope the intro was good. I even got my microphone this time, so hopefully that helps the sound as well. So let's bring Andy in from Miles Franklin. How are you doing this evening, Andy?
Mike, I'm doing good, buddy. How about yourself?
I'm, you know what? We've been locked down in the home for, I don't know, 3 or 4 days straight with rain. So I'm excited to get outside and enjoy the nice warm weather here in Idaho. And I'm right next to the Snake River. So it's pretty good scenery here, to be honest with you.
Right on. Glad to hear it. Glad things are going well.
Yeah. So Scott's going to join us this evening.
I just texted him. He said, oh, dang, I didn't know. Hang on. So he's coming right now.
Scott will be here with us, folks, and we always enjoy Scott. And, you know, when now we got a power team together, when Scott and Andy are together, look out. So, you know, last night, Andy, I put out a warning to America about everything that's going on here in the United States, around the world. You know, of course, hyperinflation happening and gas prices going up, talk of things not being available on the shelves, just everything that's going on. I think you'll know about this. I got a text this afternoon that said, hold on just a second, because I know you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Where did it go? They just hiked interest rates 3/4. And so I know that you keep up on that a lot, Andy. I want to go ahead and welcome Scott to the show as well. He's here with us. Welcome, Scott. But hiking the interest rates by 3/4, could you explain to the audience what that means?
Yeah, well, it's basically spitting into a lake, spitting into the ocean. It does a whole lot of no good. They're talking about what's called the federal funds rate. The federal funds rate, the overnight rate to the banks, as an example, for quite some time has been at roughly 0.25%. In their last meeting, they raised the rate of interest to 0.75. They raised it by 50 basis points. 100 basis points is 1%. So when they raised it by 75 basis points here at the last meeting today, that puts it up to 1.5%. So look at it this way. The rate that the Fed is paying is 1.5%, yet inflation is at 9%. And so you're losing, in this case, 7.5% compounding to inflation. So the real return, so the nominal rate of return is 1.5%. The real rate of return is the nominal rate minus inflation is negative 7.5%. And, you know, it's a joke. To understand how big of a joke it is, in 1980, when inflation was double digits, the then Fed chairman, Paul Volcker, raised the federal funds rate to 19.75%. That would put 30-year mortgages at 25%. That would put revolving credit card debt at 30, 35%. You imagine what that would do to the real estate market? Because here you have the federal funds rate that before today had only stood up to 75 basis points, not even 1%. And in that time that they've been talking about this, the mortgage rates are up 40% in the last 6 months, have doubled in the last year. So the cost of a home is doubled what it would have been last year, assuming the price was the same, making the houses the most unaffordable they've ever been in history, actually. And so what happens when rates really rise? We've talked about on your show originally, we talked about how transitory was bullshit. It wasn't transitory. We said that right away. We knew it. And then it became structural. And now it's becoming real. And So I guess I would simply say to you that inflation is roaring out of control. And the only way that you can really tame inflation with the tools that the Fed has would be to raise the rate of return commensurate with the inflation rate. So what's even more maddening about all of this, Mike, is that the CPI, which is the measurement of inflation, excludes food, energy, and housing.
Yep.
So if you're grilling behind you there out on the lake, that cost you a whole hell of a lot more than it did last summer. To drive up to the lake cost you a whole hell of a lot more than it did last summer. And to heat your cabin, if you have one, I mean, it costs you a whole hell of a lot more than it did last summer. The point of it is that a lot of the things that are really inflated that you need every day are not even counted in the official measurement of inflation. They did that since 1980 to make things look better than they are. So what Paul Volcker did by raising rates to 19.75% is that he squashed inflation. The only way that the Fed could even get in front of this, instead of raising it 75 basis points, they should have raised it 800 basis points to 8.5%. And then you're almost on par with their bullshit CPI number. At least you're not going backwards, according to their metrics. But anyways, that's what it means in a nutshell.
All right. Well, let me get Scott in this conversation. How are you doing, Scott?
Oh, good. I was sorry. I was fashionably late. The heat had me wound out. I was flopping around outside, and Andy saved me. He said, "You're supposed to be on here with me." I was like, "Oh shit!"
Let me ask Scott a question. I just reported on Headline Hits. I think it was, what's today? Wednesday. It must have been Monday, or maybe it was Thursday of last week. The current fake administration came out and said, referring to hyperinflation, that this economy that we're seeing right now is one of the best economies in American history. And to get better than what we see right now for an economy, we'd have to go clear back to the early 1990s or even further back to the 1960s. Scott, what do you say about that?
Bullshit.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, Scott? Besides bullcrap.
Well, Andy was just talking about the inflation in the mortgage industry, and I'm already getting messages from people that are working in the mortgage industry and retail, real estate agents that are being laid off today because of what just happened. So this is already starting to have repercussions in that whole industry right now. And they were just talking about how next month they're supposed to raise it up another 75%, if I'm not correct. If I'm correct.
And 75 basis points. Yes, that's correct.
Yes, sir. And then even the following month, they said September they were going to raise it up some more, and then even in November. I don't think this economy is going to last that long before. I think it just seems like it's all imploding all around. And we've all said it for quite some time. There was an article that says it's like which Federal Reserve, they're like in a race to see how fast that they can crash the economy. And they're doing a damn good job.
Man, they're like one of those trains over there in Japan or whatever that goes like 400 miles an hour or something. They are on fast pace. I want to come back to Andy with a question. I did a Headline Hits today, and I know that you're very in tune with this, Andy. We've talked about it on the show quite a bit. Coinbase, Bitcoin. Coinbase made an announcement, I believe it was yesterday, that they're getting ready to lay off a fifth of their workforce, which the number doesn't really seem right. They say that they have around 5,000 full-time employees, and they're going to drop it down to 1,100. They make the excuse that they're laying people off because they overhired during the peak. What's your opinion on that?
My opinion on that is far less than what the CEO came out and told the public a couple of weeks ago, where he said if Coinbase were to file for bankruptcy, keep in mind their IPO came out, I don't know, way higher than the value of the stock's gotten clobbered. And he came out and said, due to less trading volume, and get this, anyone who leaves their coins on Coinbase runs the risk of losing them. Similar to a bankruptcy, they become subordinate general creditors. They're last in line behind the bondholders. They can lose it all. And that's why people say never hold your cryptos on the exchange. It's just like this other crypto firm that went bankrupt the other night. I forgot their name, Oculus or whatever the heck it is. The thing of it with them is that they're an exchange where, you know, people would give them their coins and they would pay interest. Interest on a non-interest bearing asset means that they're lending it out to other people at a higher rate of return so that they can make a profit. And now they're suspending all redemptions because they obviously don't have the Bitcoin, and it's a scam. It's a Ponzi scheme. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So when you hear the biggest crypto exchange in the United States, a publicly traded company, say if you leave your coins on the exchange and the exchange goes bankrupt, they even threw out the word bankrupt. Obviously, things are not real good for them, considering they're now laying off so much of their workforce. But they said if we go bankrupt, those people with their coins on the exchange risk the chance of losing them all and then just getting in line with the bankruptcy proceeding. This is real. And, you know, I think that what Luna coin showed is that, you know, this can happen in a blink of an eye. So I've never been much for cryptocurrency, but I read an interesting article today, and it talked about, without getting too deep into it, it talked about how when the bicycle was invented in Germany many years ago, hundreds of years ago, everyone thought it was crazy, and that, you know, the guy who invented it didn't even have pedals. You had to use your feet, drove it a certain amount of distance in a certain amount of time. And over time, there were like 1,200 or 1,500 or 2,000 companies that were selling bicycles, all with their own gimmicks. And there was all sorts of people who said it's all a bunch of crap. What a horrible idea. No one will ever use it. Well, most of those companies went bankrupt. Some of them stuck around. The actual utility of a bicycle lasted the test of time. What I'm getting at, you could say the same thing about in 2000 with the .com, with the you know, all of those tech stocks that came out of nowhere in the 90s and 2000, and a lot of them went bankrupt and bust, but a lot of them have stuck around. Point of it is that distributed ledger technology is real, but a lot of these crypto coins are crap, and people will find that out very quickly. But I think that the biggest issue that I see with cryptocurrencies, and I legitimize the whole distributed ledger technology mentality or the idea behind it. It has utility, but the problem that I see with cryptos right now, Mike, is that it's been Wall Streeted. Wall Street owns so much in the way of cryptocurrencies that if you look at the way that NASDAQ is going, it mirrors the way the cryptos are going. And I think if Wall Street gets into trouble, you'll see the crypto market get into trouble very quickly. And that is because a lot of the money, a lot of this massive performance you've seen in cryptocurrencies where people can become millionaires in a week, I mean, that doesn't happen in real life, but it did in this industry. And it's also because the Fed pumped in so much money into the system and kept interest rates so low that Wall Street hedge funds could go in with $100 million and buy up a whole bunch of cryptos, pop the price up like that, make a fortune. And the same thing is true with stocks and bonds and real estate, but also with crypto. There's a tremendous part of its performance due to Wall Street involvement. And I think that there's a danger signal flashing as it pertains to you know, the health of the stock market, of the hedge funds, and just what happens when the price starts to fall. Like, for example, Michael Saylor, I think is his name. I forgot the name of his company. Scott, you probably know. MicroStrategies, I think it's called.
Correct.
Saylor, I think is his name. He borrowed over $200 million to buy Bitcoin at an average price of $30,000 a coin. And if it goes to 20,000 and it's just about there, he gets a margin call. So how many of these other big hedge funds and big funds have borrowed money, gone on margin or on credit to borrow money on a sure thing that's gone nowhere but down? And we're this close to him getting a big margin call, which means he would have to either come up with more money to put down as collateral or sell Bitcoin that he's holding in order to get in line with the margin requirements. So, it's a scary time right now, as far as I'm concerned, for all asset classes, and crypto is not immune from it because of Wall Street's involvement, which is, when it was originally issued, it was the antithesis of Wall Street and the antithesis of regulation. And yet now these same people who talked about it being the greatest thing since white bread because there was no regulation, they're saying, well, regulation is going to be good. All I'm simply saying is, and when the smoke settles, the dust clears, there'll still be distributed ledger technology. There'll still be some cryptocurrencies. But a lot of these cryptocurrencies that people think have, that are great and have utility, they'll be horseshit. And when you look at this company, I forgot the name. I think it's Oculus or something like it, the one that just suspended trading. So imagine you buying a $2 million house because you just made $27 million. And they're saying, sorry, you can't take your money out until we'll let you know when, if ever. And that's, there are problems there. And I think what you're seeing on Coinbase, because they're publicly traded, they're trying to get out in front of it.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to come back to you here in a minute, Andy. I want to ask Scott something. Here we go, Scott. Reported last week that old, what do we want to call him this week? Joey Dimes, Joe Biden. He flew out to Iowa to pat the farmers on the back in the state of Iowa, on the back, Nebraska, over E15. Biden and the current fake administration is going out on a limb saying that they're going to fix high fuel prices by helping promote E15, which is ethanol-based fuel from corn. And the problem is the entire program is government subsidized, which means the government is in on it. And I've done a lot of research on E15, and it's not good stuff. It really can ruin a lot of vehicles out there. I know you're not supposed to use them in lawnmowers or weed eaters, any kind of small engines. Now, anything that's produced over like 2007 might be okay. Flex fuel vehicles are okay to use that. For people who don't know what E15 is, it's the blue pump. It's the baby blue pump at the gas station, 85% ethanol or whatever that is. I would like to get your opinion on that, Scott. What of any help is that to the American people?
Well, it's like you said, I have a buddy of mine who's a mechanic, and he said that corn-based ethanol fuel is very bad for engines. And when you put it in, you're going to ruin that motor. It's just a matter of time. And, it's kind of like anything, when the government gets its sticky, fat little fingers into it, they just muck it up. They never, you name one government program that works. You can.
I want to chime in on that too. If I may, let me just say one thing about that. And he's right. And you're both right. But what is the one thing everyone keeps hearing? What's coming? What shortages are coming? Food shortages, right? Look at all the processing plants that got burnt down. I mean, I saw a list today. It'll blow your damn mind how many food processing plants, turkeys and chickens and eggs, burned to the ground, right? And they keep warning about food shortages. So I have an idea. Let's go and tell the farmers to take all this corn that they're growing that could feed people and turn it into fuel. Just an idiot. Like let's not open up drilling in the U.S. and let's close the pipelines and let's just starve people some more. So anything that has corn in it's going to cost a whole hell of a lot more. It's just absolutely asinine as far as I'm concerned.
I agree.
I think Scott's absolutely right when he said they're doing everything possible as quickly as possible to destroy the American economy and destroy America, period. They're on a good path right now. They're absolutely on track, if not ahead of schedule, and they're trying to make up for lost time.
I would say they're overachievers.
They're definitely overachievers, that's for sure. It's pretty crazy. I had another question for you, Andy, and now I got all riled up about E15, and I can't remember exactly what I was wanting to ask you, but it was pretty. Oh, I know what it was. A lot of people been contacting me lately, and I have asked you this question a million times. You know, they have some concern about having money in the banks. You know, not everybody can take every dime that they have, pull it out, and buy silver or buy gold or buy property. And I've asked you a million times, what do you think? And we're not financial advisors, but you know, what's some safe places maybe that they could put their money? Because I think it was you and I in a conversation that we had. Maybe it was Scott, but we talked about how some of these banks have said they've put it out there. They sent out the emails or whatever and made statement that, you know, if the government can't bail them out like we did in 2008 when we went out and helped all the big banks out of that situation, that they basically, if I understand correctly, they can go in and take people's money and not have to give it to them. Is there any fact to that statement? And if so, what could we do to maybe help encourage people to secure some of their money somehow? I don't know.
Okay, so let's just first, the short answer is yes, 100%, and I'll answer it. But when you lend money to someone, you're lending money for a return, right? They're using your money, and for that money, they want to make money, and so they're going to pay you money to borrow your money. So the higher the rate of return, the greater the risk. Like a junk bond or something that is very risky ought to pay a high rate of return. When you talk about the risk involved with leaving dollars in a bank, not only are you watching it erode in value to the printing press through inflation, but you also have, is what you talked about, bail-ins. In 2008, when the banks were bailed out by the taxpayers, they passed a law making that illegal in 2009. So the banks won't get bailed out by the taxpayers again, but they will bail in from within. It's just as if a bankruptcy proceeding. It's the exact same thing. So in other words, if the bank goes bust because they made stupid decisions, they will take, and I don't know the number that they'll choose. I believe in Cyprus, it was anything over $100,000, if I'm not mistaken. But let's just pretend it's the bullshit $250,000 FDIC protection where it's woefully underfunded. If Wells Fargo went bankrupt, they'd be bankrupt. But suffice it to say, let's just say 250. If anyone had anything over a certain amount of money, maybe it's the 250, it would be bailed in, meaning that money then goes to a pool, to a bankruptcy proceeding. Everyone's money above that amount goes to the pool so that it can be divvied up in a pro rata share. And that's called bail in. And that's indeed what they will do. It is written into law. It was written into law in 2009, I believe. Bailouts aren't going to happen. Bail-ins will. And at the same time, they did something a little lesser known, and it's called money market gating. And that happened because in 08, Lehman Brothers had a lot of money invested in it through money markets. And the money markets started to go upside down. It's called breaking the buck, where you can't even pull out what you put in to the money market. So at the same time they passed the bail-in legislation, they passed money market gating. So the shit starts to hit the fan. You're stuck in a money market and you're locked in, you're gated. You cannot get out because it's like putting stops on a stock exchange where it opens limit down and it's stopped. It's to keep everything from blowing up. And that's why in all of these things, the only way to really get ahead of it is to be proactive. So what do? Do you pull all your money out of the bank? I don't know. Do you put it into stocks at all-time highs? I don't know. Do you put it into real estate at all-time highs? When as of yesterday or the day before, when the numbers came out, the mortgage demand is at its lowest level in 22 years. And that just like that, right? After everything was selling in a matter of minutes, the lowest demand in 22 years by just a little bit of an increase in the federal funds rate with these high prices, the stupid high prices that are irrational, and rising interest rates. No one can afford it any longer. So, where do you put it? Probably not there. Probably not stock market at all-time highs, inversely correlated to a rise in rates. I I don't know, a bank where it can be bailed in, a bank where you're losing money to, you're getting paid 0.5% or less, 0.25%, and inflation's running at 10, 12, 15, 18%, real inflation, 9% by the CPI. So where do you put it? I think it's really important to understand, Mike, and Scott and I have talked about this on his show a million times. Gold and silver have been wealth for 5,000 years. They're not to get wealthy. They are wealth that has lived through 2 world wars, German hyperinflation, the Great Depression, and it will still be wealth in the year 3000 when the dollar bills in our wallets are hanging from a frame in the Smithsonian. I say the same thing every time. It is wealth. And that's the most important thing to understand here is that you're removing the counterparty risk of inflation, of bail-ins, of gating, and collapsing markets and collapsing systems. So look, you can't put all your money into gold or silver. Maybe you can. Depends how you look at the world. But I would ask yourself the question, and that is simply, what exposure do you want to this system? A currency that's over 150 trillion in debt, at the lowest interest rates ever, and they're not moving up. And everything that is considered wealth in this country is inversely correlated with that rising rate. So, a lot to think about as you're trying to decide where to put your money.
I had to mute my mic because I have a couple of rice burners over here wanting to play hot rod. I was waiting for them to crash. I was going to turn my camera around and show everybody a good wreck. Almost as good a wreck as the American economy right now. But I don't know. I don't know if you could beat that. I'm going to go back to Scott because I got a great question for Scott. Scott, where's the football? Why have we not seen a certain person carrying the football? Where's the quarterback? Why haven't we seen that? Your thoughts?
There's a lot of speculation about that. And, the speculation is he doesn't have that football. So that just brings in more speculation about a lot of things. And one of the things I want to add to what Andy was talking about, because I had to steal one of his lines. One of my lines is the dollar that you have, you can guarantee you'll be worth less tomorrow morning. And when you own precious metals, you are the bank.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to add to that, because I had to use that. I've used that many a time when I'm talking to people. It's like, do you want to be the bank or do you want them to hold your money? And Cyprus is the perfect example of a haircut.
Yeah, and when you talk about the money is never worth more, you can go back to Weimar Republic, Germany, at the end of World War I, when the repatriations were being made, and they had to where the currency was rapidly inflating away. Now, this was a long time ago. So the people would get their money on payday and they would sprint to the store to buy anything that they could in order to buy it before prices went up, or in other words, the Reichmark went down. Now, things move much quicker nowadays, but you're right. And there's an economic law, and I forgot the name, it's like Trafalgar's or something along those lines, law that says the dollar is never worth more but when it is first issued, and the people closest to that money spigot have the greatest use of it. So you're right, in this environment, the dollar is losing so much ground so rapidly. But what happens if the dollar loses its petrol reserve status? That's something we've talked about a lot, and I think ultimately is coming. When that happens and all of the dollars get dumped, you have to remember that the U.S. represents about 10 to 12% of global population. And every country on the planet has had to use dollars to buy oil for the past 50 years due to our relationship with the Saudi kingdom that now Russia has kind of stepped in on and now is aiding and offering protection to Saudi Arabia and to Nigeria, both of which have agreed to or are in discussions to sell their oil to China for yuan. You're seeing all of these countries strike deals outside the dollar. We've talked about the Belt Road Initiative, where 75% of the world is now using the Chinese digital yuan in this massive infrastructure project. Just the other day, there's a new route from Iran to India, safe passage the whole way through. You're seeing all of these countries usurp the dollar, look away from the dollar. And when those dollars get sold because they aren't needed any longer. They come back here, creating way more inflation than anything you think we've seen already. And when that happens, what happens to interest rates? They go straight up. There's your great reset that Klaus Schwab talks about. A global dumping of dollars incites a massive increase in interest rates, blows up stocks, bonds, and real estate at the exact same time, and the dollar collapses too. The four pillars of wealth are gone. And that's your great reset. That's why you own gold and silver. Could it happen? Maybe. Seems logical to me. It's already happening to an extent. It hasn't officially happened where Saudi says, well, you don't need to use dollars anymore to buy oil, but you can see by Nigeria selling their oil to China for yuan. They're the second biggest OPEC producing country in the world. They are going against the charter. So what happens when it's opened up for all of the OPEC nations to sell their oil for whatever currency they want? Every country that has had dollars, the synthetic demand of dollars, they'll dump them. Yeah. And if you think inflation sucks now, wait until that happens. If you think there's chaos, wait until you see double-digit interest rates and watch what happens to stocks, bonds, and real estate. They vaporize. So where do you put your money? I don't know, but I do believe if you leave it in dollars, you're destined to go broke. Keep enough in the bank to pay your bills. Short of that, anything other than that, you're not getting paid a fair rate of return for the massive risk that you are bearing holding dollars in the system.
Thank you for that, Andy. I'm going to come back to you with another question, then I'll get back to Scott here in a minute. I saw last week and reported where China was having a run on the banks. People were running to the ATM machine, running to the bank, trying to pull out money as quickly as they can. Could you explain to the audience what a run on the bank is, and is that something that is possible that we may see here in America soon?
Well, yeah, I mean, if this is exactly what we've been talking about. If these types of most people don't understand this. Most people don't understand that bail-ins are now law. Most people don't understand that gating is now law. And I don't think most of the people see the problems with the whole system the way that others do. But when that becomes obvious and everyone runs to take their money out of the bank, the banks during COVID were able to relinquish all their reserve requirements. So they may, if they're lucky, have just a few percent of the amount of money deposited they have. The rest of it is liability. So if all of a sudden people get wind of this and everyone wants their money at the same time, it's like everyone calling Bernie Madoff and saying, oh, we want all our money at once. It's a big, big problem. I'm not saying the whole banking system is a Ponzi scheme, but what I am saying is that the banks are over leveraged and majorly undercapitalized. So a run on the banks is that people fear that they won't get their money, that it may get bailed in or they may get locked out somehow or whatever it may be. So it's give me my money now. We talk about that on the COMEX market, and that would be a force majeure where everyone says, give me the silver that I have back in these contracts. What the Hunt brothers did in 1980. It's a run on the system when the realization is that the assets that they claim to have are not actually in the vault. It's the exact same thing we're talking about with Coinbase. What if everyone, what they're telling you is we don't have the assets backing our guarantees. So that's the same thing that's happening with the banks. And when people realize that and realize that the risk of leaving it there is far greater than the paltry return and everyone goes to pull their money out, they don't have it. The banks close, the banks go bankrupt, the banks go belly up. And that's real. And it's happened before. It can happen again. It's happened in this country just a few years ago in California. I don't remember the exact circumstances, but banks go belly up as well. Absolutely.
Hey, Mike,
I
just want to add to that because I just got an email exactly what you're talking about today. And it was multiple sources contacted by Asian markets have confirmed deposits of the following 6 banks have been frozen since mid-April. And it lists the 6 banks. I can't pronounce them. And it says, but it's understood the banks with branches across the Henan and Akinan or whatever provinces successfully issued announcements in April stating that they would suspend online banking and mobile banking services due to a system upgrade. At the same time, clients reported their electronic deposits and online accounts, mobile apps, and third-party platforms could not be withdrawn. I just saw that today. So,
Well, I've been told by my sources that the start to this reset, or whatever you want to call it, is exactly what you just said there, Scott. Banks are going to send things out that say, "Hey, we can't give you your money because we got to do a system upgrade right now." So
yeah.
pay attention to that, folks. I want to ask you this question, Scott, and then I'm going to come back to Andy. What are your thoughts on old Puddin' Pop there, Joey Dimes, whatever you want to call this guy, flying around the world begging other countries for baby formula, and more importantly, begging OPEC and Saudi Arabia and everyone else for more crude oil? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, that just goes to stupidity of this whole administration. I've got reports, I've got friends down in Mexico. They've got plenty of baby formula down in Mexico. Why are they having to import that stuff from Germany? Why didn't they just go down to Mexico and get that stuff by the plane load? So what we're being told is not reality. And you can see this is all just kickbacks probably going on for days. And it's all a big scare tactic that they're running on the people. They could go right down there to Mexico. They got store shelves, plenty of that stuff. I know, I've seen pictures of it. So that's all just more horse hockey.
Well, Scott, there was a report this week as well that other countries around the world, their shelves are full. America is the only ones. This is the report that I heard that America is the only one seeing empty shelves. Is there any truth behind that? What are you hearing?
Well, I see, like I say, I just see other places that have the formula. I mean, look at Russia. They totally they just taken over McDonald's and booted McDonald's out, the corporate people, and just reopened McDonald's under a Russian name. And all their food prices are way cheaper. Their gas prices are way cheaper. Their friendly countries that are doing business with Russia are getting a discount on their oil. So
30 to $35 a barrel less than what Brett is putting out right now.
Sure. So this just goes to show, and just today, it was reported again, China and Russia, Putin and Xi are working together, and it says just in China and Russia are working to back each other on sovereignty and security matters. Putin said in a phone call. So they're working together, and all they have to do is combine, go back their currencies, and America's done. And if India jumps in the game, which they're already in there, those people live on that side of the earth. They are going to work together. Look at all the alliances Putin has put together, working with all these. He just met with Lil Kim over in North Korea. So Putin is over there building all these alliances where all we can do is talk about war. They're talking about sending more arms over there to Ukraine. And, it's just funding this proxy war. And all it's doing is bankrupting America. And they're doing it on purpose.
Yeah, Putin is building alliances after NATO has put all those restrictions and everything on him, and yet Russia is flourishing right now. Which brings me to the next question for Andy. Andy, gold-backed currency here in America. I know that Wyoming is one state. I think Utah is another state. I know I've asked you this question before. I've asked you your thoughts on these gold-backed currencies here in America. And then the second part of that question is the Russian ruble. We reported, I think the last time that you were on the show, or maybe it was the time before, how that currency from Russia is outperforming, or maybe it was Scott. I can't remember. It was one of you smart guys here. It's outperforming all the other currencies around the world, but yet we put sanctions on Russia supposedly, and the EU was not going to take Russia's oil. Well, guess what? That was a dumb move because Scott's right. India and everyone else is grabbing it as quick as they can. They're selling it between $30 to $35 a barrel less than what they can get it anywhere else.
Yeah, well, again, remember, you take US and Europe, you got 15% of the globe. That means 85% of the world is still trading with Russia. Russia is smart by selling their commodities for euro and gold. All they're really doing, all these sanctions really do is change who Russia does business with and in which currency they settle in. I just want to mention something because what you guys are talking about, I want to try to tie it all together. I've made a big deal on both of your shows of talking about the Belt Road Initiative. 75% of human population all settling on the Chinese digital yuan, which has done close to 10 billion in transactions since 2021. It's working. And that's 75% of human population indoctrinated into a new currency that the US isn't part of. The rails, the roads, the maritime channels is only going to be patrolled by military and commerce. It's the Panama Canal on steroids. You see the one that just came out. Google Iran, India transit line, and you'll see that they have made a new corridor for safe passage for commerce in between Russia, Iran, and India. You have all of these deals that are being struck outside the dollar. This is the end of the dollar as a singular world reserve currency. It represents over 85% of the world. And so we are, I would argue, we have angered enough people, and the weaponizing of the dollar and pushing Putin out of SWIFT accelerated it, because I guarantee you the Chinese and North Koreans and the Arabs, like Saudi Arabia, and they're all thinking, are we next? So they're all going to sign up with these other groups. They're going to coalesce. And I believe they will issue a gold-backed BRICS nation currency on the back of the success of the launch of the Chinese digital yuan. They will not make it redeemable where you can trade in your digital whatever, BRIC currency or yuan for gold, but they will use the distributed ledger technology to show the immutability and the veracity of the gold backing it. Which are the countries that have been producing more gold than anyone and accumulating more gold than anyone? India, Russia, China. Do you not see the pattern here? South Africa. These are all the BRICS nations. And so if they want to break dollar hegemony, all they need to do, as Scott says, is peg their currency, their new combined currency, who all of them together, their military might would squash ours. And so you put it all together, it'll have a bigger economy, a bigger military, a sounder economy, a gold-backed currency. And what do we have? All we have is sanctions and debt and have pissed off the world. And I hate to sound this way, but you can see the pieces being put into place. It's very obvious. And what did I say on Scott, on your show, the very first show we ever did? What was the biggest moment of my career? Tier 1 revision of gold. Gold is now a tier 1 asset. It's on par with dollars. It is the only other tier 1 asset in the world. Riskless. Who's accumulating it all? They are. And who's been buying it for centuries? They have. And who is it rooted in their whole psyche, in their whole culture? It's theirs. And so I think that will happen. Now, will that force the US's hand? Maybe. Could they issue a gold-backed dollar? Sure, they could. And it would be the best thing that they could ever do. But gold would have to be way higher than it is right now. And I think it's doable. You could peg a certain percentage of the dollar to gold and use a distributed ledger technology to show the veracity of it. Bottom line is no one's ever going to trust the central banks again unless whatever system that arises is backed by something. Because governments since the beginning of time have been doing the same thing. And that is choosing inflation or debasement over austerity and tough decisions. And I think we've pissed off one too many people one too many times. And as the world reserve currency, you cannot tell the world who can and who cannot use the currency. That was our biggest mistake. And pushing Russia into SWIFT. And like Scott says, was that a calculated mistake? Did they know what they were trying to do? Did they try to initiate the Great Reset? Because of all of these countries who have had to own dollars to buy oil all these years, making it the foundation of every currency on the planet, if they all dump it like that, you think it's bad now? Welcome to hell. a couple days later. As the dollar is obliterated, interest rates go to the moon and all markets collapse. If you think it's tough finding baby formula and food in the shelves now, watch when credit completely stops and blows up. And think of all the credit that is being used in every business to get food to the shelf. The amount of credit being used to grow it in the ground, produce it, drive it to the store, and then the store owner to buy it. There's credit extension the whole way. When all of that blows up, as the dollar collapses and markets crater, that's the big problem. And I don't want to be pessimistic, but I don't see much of a way around it based upon our government pushing this agenda upon the rest of the world and pissing them all off. And not doing anything to fix our situation at home. So not to say that we won't find a way to rectify this situation in another administration or down the road, but I do think it's going to be a couple of years of difficulty if things continue the way that they are going.
Yeah, thanks for that answer, Andy. And I know a lot of people are listening right now. This probably, it scares the hell out of them. It's depressing. I see a couple of the comments through the sunglasses, barely. But we're just trying to give you guys reality here and great information so that you can make wise decisions for yourself and for your family. And listen, nobody's getting left behind here. We're all going to unite and we're going to help each other get through it. I mean, Andy is gracious enough to come on my show as often as I possibly can have him to give you guys this information, to give you that warning. Scott is gracious enough to come on here and help me out as well and give his input on this. And this isn't anything that I look at as scary or depressing. We've been talking about it for a long time. This is just another heads up. Hey, this is how the situation has progressed. Now, we talked about this a year ago. Here we are today. This is how far it's progressed. It's getting close. So just make sure that you guys are prepped up, that you guys got a little bit of silver, that you guys got some food, you guys got extra fuel, just the things that you know that you can use to get through the situation. If you guys are in the market for buying silver, Andy and his team, Scott's part of the team as well at Miles Franklin. Great service, great prices. You guys can go to info@milesfranklin.com. Use promo code Liberty Warrior Nation, LWN, whatever you guys want to throw in there. And these guys are there to help you out. I'm going to come back to Scott. I want to talk, Scott, real quick, because I know you kind of keep up with a lot of this stuff like I do. I just reported today, I think it was, that China is upgrading their nuclear capability. Now, I don't want to scare people because China's not the only one doing it. There are 9 countries of the world that all have nuclear capability, including America. And I'm sure we're not privy to it, but I'm sure America continues to upgrade their systems as well. But what do you think with China putting this out there? Is that a posturing? Are they signaling? Are you reading anything from this article that they just put out today?
Well, just yesterday they were talking about they're drafting the legal framework, to be able to invade Taiwan if the West keeps provoking, Taiwan to go over with NATO and all that stuff. And so China is not going to let NATO go in there and take over Taiwan and separate them out from China. They are emphatic about that, and they're not going to let it happen. And there's no telling, just like in Ukraine with the different types of facilities that they have over there in Ukraine, could be the exact same thing that they have in Taiwan. And Taiwan would be the exact same scenario as Ukraine, where they were a threat to Russia with those type of facilities, those type of, we'll just call them facilities. Everybody should know what that is by now. And
40, what is it, like 47 of them in Ukraine?
Exactly. And that's not including the big pharma that's there. That's just the military ones, so now you have the same scenario in Taiwan where it is a direct threat to China, and they're not going to let Taiwan just slip through the cracks. They are not. And if they're drafting the legal framework and they're already doing maneuvers, which I've seen the videos, man, they got one of those hovercraft that looked like it came out of Star Wars, one of them big battalion looking things, a big triangle ship. That's huge, boy. It wasn't no downstream ship neither. This thing, they got people turning out of this damn thing. It looked like ants coming out of there. I was like, holy shit, man, huge. They ain't playing. And everybody think, the West is, and just like Andy said, they weaponized the dollar and they pissed people off with all these sanctions. And now all these other countries are like, why do we want to play with the dollar when y'all just come in there and just turn us off? And, we're supposed to be starving in the streets. They're done with that. So all these countries are saying, why do we want to put ourselves in that position again? They already lived through that. They're not going to do it again. And now you see China, you see Russia, and China is using the same playbook that Russia is, and they're studying it. And if they're drafting legal framework, that means they are not playing games. And America's over here playing checkers while they're playing chess.
He's not even playing checkers. He can't even play dominoes. I mean, the guy has no clue, and neither does the administration. Whoever is pulling the strings on this guy, whether you believe it's Obama or Cabal or whatever you believe, that guy is no way in charge of this country. It's just not happening. There's no way that this clown that trips walking up the stairs to Air Force One. I don't see the football. I don't see the quarterback. He ain't there. The light's on and nobody's home. Motel 6 is collapsed. So I'm going to come back to Andy with this one. We talked about trust in the banks, and we talked about people just aren't going to trust the banks anymore. If we have a collapse, if they don't have anything to back it up, meaning gold backing, what's your opinion on what people will do in the future for this? Is it going to be some type of electronic currency? Are we going to go back to the Stone Ages where it's a barter system? Your thoughts on that, Andy?
Well, if the Fed has anything to do with it, it'll be a digital Fed currency. The second in command at the Fed, her name is Lael Brainerd. I thought she was going to take over for Powell, but for some reason he was reappointed with such a pathetic first run at it. They gave him a second chance, and as you can see with what he's done with inflation and whatnot, he hasn't done such a great job. But Lael Brainerd, her whole doctrine was removal of the commercial banks and a central bank digital currency. The biggest reason that the Federal Reserve wants that is how money is created in the United States. Money must be lent into existence. And so it has to go through the commercial banks first. So without getting too deep into economics, the Fed can't buy the bonds directly from the U.S. Treasury. They have to buy them from one of the banks or funds that buy treasuries from the U.S. Treasury. And so they go to the banks and they're obliged to sell them to the Fed when they come calling, and they buy the bonds from the Fed. Now, or from the banks, the Fed does. The act of buying those bonds in and of itself pushes interest rates down and pushes the bond market up. So that's good for interest rates and the wealth effect. But the banks who sold the bonds to the Fed have two choices of what they can do with the money. The first choice is to lend it to you and I in the form of a credit card, home equity loan, student loan, mortgage, car payment, you name it. Once that is done, that money is created out of thin air because the Fed pushed a button to create the money to buy the bonds from the bank. The bank then can lend it into the public, into existence. That money just came out of nowhere. That's how money is created. The other option, if they say, well, you know what, we're reining in because the economy is horseshit and we don't want to lend the money to Mike to start a new business because we're not quite sure Mike's business will work, or we don't want to lend it to Scott to buy a new car because, well, you know, we think maybe he won't be able to make all his payments or whatever. That's the thinking. So instead of making a nice return on that money, we'll give it to the Fed and they'll pay us the federal funds rate, which used to be 25 basis points. Now it's 1.5%, making it much more attractive for the banks just to give it back to the Federal Reserve, where they hold it in a reserve account in the name of the bank. So the bank can't just take that money and give it out as bonuses or do whatever. It either lends it into existence by stimulating the economy, or it sits in a reserve account in their name at the Fed. So the Fed doesn't like that, because the Fed, if they want a loose monetary policy, if they want to create inflation, they'd rather be able to push a button and it goes right to your iPhone and you have money on your phone. And now you have just created money directly from the central bank. And that's modern monetary theory. That is what Lael Brainerd is. She's a modern monetary theorist, where basically says, equity be damned. You can just print. Well, at some point in a globalized world, the rest of the people are not going to accept pieces of linen paper with dead presidents on it that have no value whatsoever, because they are being printed into oblivion. So that's what they want. They want to be able to enact monetary policy directly to the public. And at the same time, it would certainly do a lot of things that the government would like removal of all privacy in the black market and all of those things where, your privacy is gone. On one hand, you get the Fed what they want. On the other hand, you get the government what they want. It's a central banker's wet dream. And the likelihood of going into a digital currency, I think, is substantial. The way the Chinese did it is they still have their paper yuan, but renminbi or yuan, but they also have the digital yuan. And that is gaining traction. It's done almost 10 billion in transactions on the New Belt Road. So pretty soon they'll probably phase out the old and move everything into the new. And I think it's just a matter of time. When Nancy Pelosi in 2020 said viruses can live on currency, that to me, the genie was out of the bottle. And she wanted a central bank digital Fed token, Fed dollar. It's coming. I don't know when, but I think inevitably it's coming. Maybe when things blow up, as interest rates rise and markets collapse, people will be more apt to listen to or to accept a central bank digital currency. But I do think it's coming. It'll be forced upon us at some point.
All right, I'm going to ask Scott one last question here, and then we're going to roll into final thoughts. And I'll get your final thought first, Andy, and then back to Scott. So, Scott, here's your final question before we roll into final thoughts. Is the Democrats are meeting this week, Andy or Scott? The entire Democratic caucus is meeting this week to go over how are they going to message this great economy to the American people. I guess they're bringing all the cats and dogs and everybody in, because with the historical economy that we have right now, that's so great, that we haven't seen anything like this since 1990. Why do they all got to get together? What's going on? I don't understand why it takes all of them to put together a messaging campaign that says, hey, we're the best. 2022 is here. Vote for us in the midterms. 2024 is right around the corner. We want 4 more years of this guy. Your thoughts on this?
Well, it was kind of interesting because AOC and her brain power was on some news show, and they asked her, about, supporting Brandon for 24, and she couldn't give a definite yes that she was going to support him. She gave that mealy mouth answer and just ran around the question. But the person, was on the mainstream news said, well, that's not a definite yes. And, so their problem is they can't support this. They can't run from reality, because people, you can sit there and say, oh, this is the greatest economy since, whenever. But when people have lost 25% of their retirement, it costs $200 to fill up their pickup truck, gas, electric, everything has gone through the roof. They can't deny reality. And the people that keep trying to support and make excuses for this, they are losing all the way around, because anybody could say, have you filled up your truck lately? Have you paid your electric bill? You bought any food? They've lost the narrative. And so their whole argument, they could get all together and have popcorn and talk about all the greatest things in the world, but they have to face the reality of the American people that this is bullshit and it ain't working. And that's just plain and simple. So they've lost the narrative. And when people like you or me and other people are coming out and just railing against it daily, you're driving the narrative now. And that's the thing. They have they can't deal with that because you just can't run from the facts. And
Yep.
this is all fact. A fact. And what is a fact? Something that has occurred, plain and simple.
No, nice definition there, and it's true. The fact is this is the worst economy that we've seen in a very, very long time. 41-year high of inflation, and they can't run from that. They can't run from the fact that Donald Trump had the best economy in American history in a long time. We had the lowest unemployment rates. We had the highest incomes. Things were really good under the Trump administration. And for them to come out and say that this is the best economy in American history since early 1990, it just says it all. They're in some quicksand and they can't get out. It's all over with. There will be a red wave that crosses from the East Coast to the West Coast that fateful night in November of 2022. I think it's going to be a big time election wave that we see. So I'm going to come back to Andy with his final thought tonight because I got to get back on the road and get going here. Sun's going down, and I don't like the boogeyman after dark. So, what's your take on tonight's conversation, Andy? Or what's the final thought that you'd like to leave everyone with tonight? I know a lot of people, if it's their first time watching us tonight from either Truth Social or Twitter, they may not have heard this before. There may be some newbies out there who are just for the first time hearing some of the conversation that we're having. And some of them are scared, depressed, sick of it. They're tired of hearing this stuff. They just want it to be over. What's the hope that we can give people tonight?
That's one of the things that sucks about talking about this stuff. I've been doing podcasts for a long time. I've owned gold and silver. I've been buying it every 2 weeks for 33 years because to me it's wealth. But look at things right now. It's important to not be sick and tired of it. It's not doom and gloom and say this is depressing because you're going to be a victim. And look at our alliances. The US, the ECB, which is the European Central Bank, and the Bank of Japan. All three are insolvent. All three of them. All three of them are massively indebted. Look at what all the other nations are doing. Even those European nations like Poland and the Czech Republic and others, I forgot at the moment, but a lot of the European Union countries, or the countries in Europe that are not part of the European Union, are the biggest accumulators of gold lately. And they're the same ones that brought all their gold back home from the Bank of England and the New York Fed. So, I think that I really do believe there's a man named Zoltan Pozsar, who Scott and I have talked about on his show quite a bit, who talks about a new Bretton Woods, a Bretton Woods 3, whereby currencies are moving from a world of financial activity, or where it's backed upon debt and leverage, to one backed upon commodities. And if you take a look at the alliances that are being made, the way that from an economic perspective, what we have done with Russia is absolutely maddening. Maybe in the sense of a small proxy war, it makes sense, but from an economic perspective, it's madness. Russia's the largest exporter of energy and commodities in the world, and to cut ourselves off from them, it's craziness. And not only that, it's incentivized all of these nations to coalesce. And I think what that means is that the standard of living in this country is going to decrease as it moves eastward. And when the dollar loses its usefulness to the rest of these countries, and it's happening, that's when things get really, really, really frightening. So what can you do? You can get out of debt. You can prepare, not just with precious metals, with food and guns and bullets and medical supplies and anything that you need. You can prepare, get ahead of this. If you think supply chain disruptions are bad now, just wait. It can get a whole lot worse. So what I would do is minimize my exposure to the dollar, buy gold and silver when I can, and prepare best I can. And if you are sitting in, stocks or 401ks or IRAs, in equities that have made you some profit, profit's not a four-letter word. Take some profit. Get on the sidelines. I'd rather see you in cash right now losing money at 8% than risking it to what could possibly happen. And better yet, get out of the system. Be your own bank. Be your own insurance company, and get out of the way of counterparty risk. I think it's going to be a defining characteristic the way for markets over the next several years. So, look, Mike, man, I wish I wasn't the purveyor of doom and gloom. This is why I don't talk about what I do with my friends unless they bring it up to me, because my beliefs are very strong and they've never been more strong. And it has nothing to do with the fact that I own one of the largest precious metals companies in the United States at all. It has to do with, look at the facts that are happening. Go back to 2017 when the German Bundesbank started pulling back their gold, and look at everything that's happened since to where we are right now, where other countries are selling oil in currency. Other OPEC countries are selling oil in other currencies other than the dollar. It is the beginning of the end of the dollar as the singular world reserve currency, and the ramifications of that are frightening. I can see why people say it's depressing. I get it. But if you put your head in the sand like an ostrich and say it's depressing, you're going to be a victim. So get out of the way of it best you can. Get out of debt, get some metal, and prepare it with any way that you can, starting with food and water and shelter and protection, and buy some silver and gold when you can. That's the best answer I could give you right now, because I think it's going to get real before it gets better. We got 3 more years with this fool.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks for that final thought. Scott, I'm going to bow out tonight with my final thought, just because I want to give you the opportunity to close like you always do with the home run. But here's the question. I see some comments in chat asking, are there any specials with Miles Franklin today? I don't have the email in front of me. Maybe you can pull it up real quick and give people the specials that Miles Franklin is offering this week. But for your final thoughts this evening, is there any light that you can shine out there for people? I agree with Andy. Get out of the way. Get in front of it. Don't be depressed. Don't sit here and talk about doom and gloom and just talk about it. Have some action behind those words. Get out there and protect yourself. And I think both your guys' comment is golden there when you say be your own bank. Don't let somebody else push you around. What's your final thought?
Well, it was interesting because I had a lady somewhere up north. She called me today. She's all panicked and she goes, I'm just scared to death. I'm scared to death. And I said, well, what's going on? And she told me, she goes, well, I got some silver, and I got some food. She lives on some land and stuff up there. And I said, and she was out of work. She was an RN and she couldn't get any work. I said, well, this is a perfect time for you to start your own business as a nurse, where you could go to people's houses like they used to do back in the old days, And she goes, well, I don't know. I got to get an LLC or all this other stuff. I said, hell, just go get you a DBA, doing business as. Costs you like $15, $20. You can go file for that, and you can go take that to the bank, and now you can open up a bank account as a business, and now you're in business. And then you can start doing that and start making you some money. You don't have to deal with all the mandates and everything that was going on with that. She goes, wow, that's a great idea. I said, what you're going to have to do, and what a lot of people will have to do, is get mentally tough. And I've mentioned this over and over and over. You get prepared. Just like Andy was saying, get you some silver, get you some food, get water. Everybody forgets about water. You can't go but 3 days without water and you're dead. You better make sure you have some water too. So, but if you're prepared, and if you know the information that's coming out on channels like this, my channels, a few others, because there's a lot of, channels you get a lot of garbage out of. But if you have good, credible information and you're mentally prepared, you are going to get through this. It's the dumbasses that aren't mentally prepared. Look at the toilet paper run that we had just not too long ago. It was an upper respiratory infection. They didn't have the running shits. And everybody's going around and buying tons and tons of toilet paper. Why? Because they're misinformed. But they're running around off the propaganda, watching the mainstream media. And if you're getting your information off that, you are going to be confused and you're not going to know what's going on. And that is the biggest thing, is know what is going on and get some good information from some credible sources. Then you are mentally prepared. Anybody that's been in the military, I was in for a short bit of time. That's the first thing you got to do. 90% of the battle is in your head. And once you're able to conquer that, you will be able to get through anything. So always keep that in mind. And then you will be prepared no matter what. Even if you're poor, you say, oh, I can't afford silver. Well, guess what? You can afford to grow some seeds, get some seeds, grow some food. You can get food will be a commodity too one day, So think about what you can do instead of what you can't do. And then once you do that, now you're not wallowing in this state of fear and desperation and all that. You're being proactive instead of reactive. That's the key.
That's the key. No, you're 100% correct. You and Andy both have given people some great advice tonight. It doesn't have to be doom and gloom. You can actually be very successful at this if you pay attention. And if you listen to great information, get ahead of the curve, you can be very, very successful. You can thrive even through some of this stuff. And, Andy, your friend there, Economic Ninja, he's always teaching everybody that we can thrive in this stuff instead of being left behind. So that's what I want to leave for my final thought tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and let Scott close us out because my battery is just about dead on the laptop. So, Scott, thanks for joining us tonight. Andy, as always, thank you for all your information and for helping us out here at LWN. Thank you, everybody, for showing up tonight. We'll be back tomorrow evening, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Ladies of Liberty. Scott, go ahead and usher us out.
All right. Well, everybody, you know the drill. Stay frosty. Donald Trump is a fucking genius.
All right. See you guys.
See you tomorrow, Scott.
Okay.
Hoping for a sincere performance, but open to finding the moment, to finding out where I'm headed now. Looking for a sign of disaster, so I can make it there faster. I'm weighing the consequences out. I can see in all directions. It's all open to interpretation, but I see colors that are breaking from the other side, the other side. When I make mountains out of summer trails, when I buckle under all the details, I'll get me. I see the river on the back of my eye.